There was a moment during my Europe trip when I seriously considered going home early. Not because anything terrible happened. Not because I got lost. Not because I ran out of money. In fact, from the outside, everything looked fine. I was in Europe. I was seeing places I had dreamed about for years. I was doing exactly what I had always wanted to do. But inside, something felt completely different. I started wondering if I had made a huge mistake coming here. And for a while, I genuinely thought about ending the trip early and going home. In this video, I'll tell you what happened, what I was struggling with, and why that difficult moment ended up teaching me one of the most important lessons I've ever learned from travel. Chapter 1. The trip I had dreamed about for years. Before I arrived in Europe, I couldn't stop thinking about the trip. For years, it had been one of my biggest dreams. I imagined the cities, the history, the food, the excitement of finally seeing places I had only seen in photos and videos. And when the trip finally became real, it felt surreal. I remember arriving and thinking, I actually did it. After all the planning, all the saving, all the waiting, I was finally there. At first, everything felt exactly the way I had imagined. Every street felt exciting. Every building seemed interesting. Every day felt like an adventure. I wanted to see everything, experience everything, capture every moment. And honestly, I was happy. The kind of happy that comes from finally achieving something you've wanted for a long time. But looking back now, I think I made a mistake before the trip even started. Not a travel mistake, not a booking mistake, not a planning mistake, an expectation mistake. Without realizing it, I had built this trip up so much in my mind that I expected it to feel amazing all the time. I expected every day to be exciting, every moment to be memorable, every experience to feel special. And that's where the problem began. Because real life doesn't work that way. Even in Europe, even on a dream trip. And in the next chapter, I'll show you the first signs that something wasn't matching the picture I had created in my head. Chapter 2. When the dream started feeling different. At first, I told myself everything was fine. And technically, it was. I was visiting incredible places, taking photos, trying new foods, doing all the things I had imagined doing. But slowly, something started to feel off. Not because Europe was disappointing. It wasn't. The problem was that my experience wasn't matching the version of the trip I had created in my head. I thought I would wake up every morning excited. I thought every day would feel unforgettable. I thought being in Europe would automatically make me happy. But some days felt normal. Some days felt tiring. Some days felt lonely. And I wasn't prepared for that. The strange thing was that I started feeling guilty. Guilty for not enjoying every moment. Guilty for feeling tired. Guilty for wanting a break. I would look around and think, you're in Europe. Why aren't you happier? And the more I asked myself that question, the worse I felt. Because now I wasn't just dealing with normal travel emotions. I was also criticizing myself for having them. I started comparing my experience to the perfect version I had imagined. And no real trip could ever compete with that. That's when I began to realize something important. The pressure wasn't coming from Europe. It was coming from my expectations. But even though I was starting to see the problem, I didn't know how to fix it. And in the next chapter, things reached a point where I seriously started questioning whether I should continue the trip at all. Chapter 3. The moment I almost gave up. I remember one particular day more clearly than the others. Nothing had gone terribly wrong. There was no disaster, no missed flight, no stolen luggage, no major problem. And maybe that's why it was so confusing. Because on paper, everything still looked great. But inside, I felt completely drained. Emotionally, mentally, even physically. I had spent so much time trying to force myself to enjoy every moment that I was exhausted. I was tired of putting pressure on myself. Tired of comparing reality to my expectations. Tired of feeling like I was somehow doing the trip wrong. And for the first time since arriving in Europe, I started thinking about home. Not because I wanted the trip to end, but because home felt familiar, comfortable, easy. For a brief moment, the idea of ending the trip early sounded incredibly tempting. I remember sitting alone and asking myself a difficult question. What if this trip isn't what I thought it would be? That question scared me, because I had invested so much into this dream. So much time, so much energy, so much anticipation, and now I was questioning everything. But looking back, that moment ended up being one of the most important moments of the entire trip. Because it forced me to stop pretending. It forced me to admit how I was really feeling. And once I stopped fighting those feelings, something unexpected started to happen. Instead of trying to make the trip match my expectations, I started paying attention to what the trip was actually teaching me. And that shift changed everything. In the next chapter, I'll tell you about the realization that completely transformed the rest of my time in Europe. Chapter 4. The realization that changed everything. The turning point didn't happen overnight. There wasn't a dramatic moment where everything suddenly became perfect. Instead, it started with a simple realization. I had been expecting Europe to make me happy. I had been treating the trip like a destination for happiness. As if stepping onto a different continent would somehow solve every problem, answer every question, and make every day feel exciting. But that's not how life works. No matter where you go, you still take yourself with you. Your thoughts, your emotions, your expectations, your struggles, they don't disappear just because the scenery changes. And strangely enough, realizing that brought me a sense of relief. Because it meant there wasn't anything wrong with me. I wasn't failing at travel. I wasn't doing Europe wrong. I was simply having a real human experience. Some days were amazing, some days were difficult, and both were okay. For the first time on the trip, I stopped demanding that every moment be extraordinary. I stopped chasing a perfect experience. And instead, I started accepting the experience I was actually having. That small shift changed everything. I felt lighter, more relaxed, more present. I stopped asking myself whether I was enjoying the trip enough, and started appreciating what was right in front of me. A quiet walk through a neighborhood, a conversation with a stranger, a beautiful view I would have rushed past before. The irony was almost funny. The moment I stopped trying so hard to have the perfect trip, the trip became so much better. And that's when I learned a lesson that has stayed with me long after leaving Europe. In the next chapter, I'll share the lesson I wish I had understood before I ever boarded that plane. Chapter 5. The lesson I brought home from Europe. Looking back now, I realize that Europe taught me something I wasn't expecting to learn. And it had nothing to do with travel. It had nothing to do with planes, trains, or famous landmarks. The lesson was this: sometimes we place impossible expectations on the things we dream about. We tell ourselves, when I get that opportunity, I'll finally be happy. When I reach that goal, everything will feel different. When I arrive at that destination, life will be perfect. But life doesn't work that way. Because happiness isn't something waiting for us at a destination. It's something we learn to experience along the journey. The mistake I made wasn't traveling to Europe. The mistake was expecting Europe to carry the weight of all my hopes and expectations. No trip could ever do that. No destination could. And honestly, that's not what travel is supposed to do. Travel isn't meant to make life perfect. It's meant to help us grow, to challenge us, to teach us, to show us new perspectives. And sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the moments that don't go according to plan. The moments that make us uncomfortable. The moments that force us to reflect. The moments that reveal something about ourselves. When I almost gave up and went home early, I thought the trip was falling apart. But now I see it differently. That difficult moment became one of the most important parts of the entire experience. Because it taught me to let go of perfection, to stop measuring experiences against impossible expectations, and to appreciate things for what they are, not for what I imagined they would be. That lesson changed the rest of my trip. And in many ways, it changed the way I look at life. Because sometimes the experience we need most isn't the one we planned for. It's the one that teaches us something we couldn't have learned any other way. Ending. The trip I almost left behind. When I think back to that moment now, the moment I almost went home early from Europe, I'm grateful that I stayed. Not because the rest of the trip suddenly became perfect. It didn't. There were still difficult days. There were still moments of uncertainty. There were still moments where things didn't go according to plan. But that's exactly the point. Travel isn't perfect. Life isn't perfect. And sometimes the pressure to make everything perfect is what stops us from enjoying what's already right in front of us. I spent so much time chasing an ideal version of this trip that I almost missed the real experience entirely. The conversations, the unexpected moments, the quiet walks, the lessons I couldn't have learned any other way. And looking back, those are the things I remember most. Not because they were spectacular, but because they were real. That's why I wanted to share this story. Because if you've ever worked hard for something, dreamed about something, or finally achieved something you wanted for a long time, you may have experienced the same thing. The realization that even our biggest dreams don't erase every struggle. And that's okay. It doesn't mean the dream was a mistake. It doesn't mean you've failed. It simply means you're human. For me, Europe wasn't just a trip. It became a lesson in expectations, gratitude, and learning to appreciate the moment I'm in. And honestly, that's a lesson I'm still learning today. So I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever looked forward to something for a long time, only to discover it wasn't exactly what you expected? Tell me about it in the comments. And if you enjoy honest travel stories, real travel lessons, and the experiences people don't usually talk about, make sure you subscribe and join me for the next adventure. Because next week, I'll be sharing another real travel story from Europe that taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.